Welcome back, everybody. Professor Powers here. We are in Chapter 17, the reproductive system, and we want to start with the human life cycle. So you may not have seen this figure before, but you know so many elements of this figure. So let's just start here with the female and male. And as adults, we know that most of the cells in our body are diploid, right? So our body cells are diploid. And when we hit puberty, we are going to make haploid sex cells. So let's take a look. If we take diving deeper into what's going on in this woman's ovaries and this gentleman's testes, then we can see essentially meiosis is occurring so that we are making haploid sex cells. So as diploid adults, we can only give one set of our chromosomes to our offspring, if we have offspring. But we do generally make eggs and sperm, and those eggs and sperm will have one set. So that's chromosome 1 through 22, the autosomes, and then one sex chromosome will be in each of your sex cells. Then we know to fully bring back the full complement of chromosomes, you have an N or haploid egg, and you have an N or a haploid sperm. The sperm fertilizes the egg, and now we recreate that 2N situation. But now what we have are essentially, because of meiosis, we have unique chromosomes that combine. And because we have two different parents, then we're also going to get increased genetic diversity because it takes two to tango. So as a result, we have a unique offspring. So this baby or young child here again has the diploid number of chromosomes, and every single day we know that we are replacing old damaged cells through mitosis, and we know that the way that we grew from a zygote to a fetus to an infant and so on and so forth was by mitosis. So we're bringing it all together. Oh goodness, here's a whole lot of stuff. Your book is going to talk about the analogies. Analogy, is that the word I want to look for? We usually like to hear the word homologous structures. Okay, so you should know that all fetuses early in life are female. They have the parts of a female, as we know females. And if that developing fetus has a Y chromosome, it is essentially going to make testosterone, and that is going to convert what would be female parts into male parts. So we call these parts that are the same, from the same original tissue, homologous structures. So you know the term homologous from the idea that homologous chromosomes, like chromosome 1 from mom and chromosome 1 from dad, pair up and cross over in meiosis 1. So homologous means essentially they are coding for the same features or structures. Okay, so here's some homologous structures. The testes in the male is homologous to the ovaries. So because of that small amount of testosterone made by the Y chromosome, it converts ovaries into testes. Now, each of them are going to make sex cells, ovaries make eggs, and testes make sperm. Okay, there's also a series of ducts that are important to transporting the sex cells. So in the male, there's a variety of ducts. And in the female, we have our uterine tube. In the male, we have seminiferous tubules that then go into the epididymis, and the epididymis is going to transport the sperm into the vas deferens. Okay, let's see. At that point, so the penis is going to be homologous to essentially the external genitalia of the female. The head of the penis is homologous to the glans clitoris. But the interesting thing about the female reproductive system is that the vagina not only serves to receive sperm, but it also is going to be the birth canal, right? And the uterus is going to transport, or is going to be important to transport sperm to essentially the oviduct, and the uterus is also going to act as the vessel, if you will, for the growth of a fertilized egg. It's going to implant and then go through the stages of growth. The last bullet here, the testes and ovaries produce sex hormones that bring about masculinity or masculinization or feminization. So we can talk about that, but essentially we're thinking about testosterone in males and in females, estrogen and progesterone. So if you need a review for mitosis and meiosis, by all means, take a moment. Otherwise, I'm going to move forward. So let's just dive into the male reproductive system. So I kind of like to start with the site of the sex cell production. So if we do that, and we can look either the cross-sectional here or the frontal section, you can see, well, here is the testis, which is singular. Testes is plural. So we see each one is going to be connected to a layer of tissue we call the epididymis. And essentially what's happening, and we'll dig down into this deeper in a little bit, but in some structures called the seminiferous tubules, sperm are undergoing meiosis. So meiosis 1 and 2, maturing to become sperm, more so in this epididymis and stored there until ejaculation. And so then we have this big long duct. This is called the vas deferens. And essentially the sperm are moving along this vas deferens and then being joined by fluids produced by a number of glands. So we have the seminal vesicle, we have the prostate gland, the bulbourethral gland, and there's a few others we're not seeing, or I'm not seeing in this particular picture. Okay, so essentially we have the secretion of these fluids. That's going to be what we call semen, and then we're going to notice that this vas deferens is going to essentially send fluids into the urethra of the male. So in the male, the urethra has a double duty in both the urinary system and also for reproductive system. So there is a sphincter somewhere in here. I haven't really studied to look for it, but essentially that is going to block off the bladder being able to exit or being able to carry urine into the urethra during an erection. So the urinary bladder, the urinary system has to stop its normal efforts of trying to eliminate that material, at least through the urethra, during sexual intercourse. Okay, so this is a nice table. It's going to summarize what's going on. So just remember that the testes and ovaries are making sex hormones. So the testes are making testosterone. This is going to be plural. Epididymes are these ducts where sperm are going to mature, and we're going to store that sperm until ejaculation. The vasa deferentia, or the vas deferens, is going to conduct or move that sperm out the epididymis. It's going to meet up eventually with the urethra. So we have, again, these glands, the seminal vesicle, contributing nutrients and fluid to the semen. So one thing that needs to be in that semen is plenty of glucose and vitamins and minerals so that those sperm can essentially have an on-demand source of energy and nutrients while they're making their big long trip to the oviduct. Next, we have the prostate gland, and it's going to contribute more fluids to the semen. One of the things that's going to be happening is that the semen is going to be slightly basic because the pH of the vagina is slightly acidic, so sperm don't really survive so well in an acidic environment. So we have essentially a little bit of these neutralizing agents in the semen to ensure that those sperm are going to be able to survive to make their long journey. The bulbourethral glands contribute mucus to the semen, and then of course we know the penis is the organ of sexual intercourse. So here's some good things. The last bullet, our semen also contains prostaglandins, and this is going to cause the uterus to contract to help push the sperm essentially up to the oviducts where, if there is an egg, it might be fertilized. All right, testes. Testes are pretty interesting, and their temperature is being controlled by the scrotum. So testes begin to develop in the abdominal cavity because they were first ovaries, right? So under the direction of that small amount of testosterone made by the testes, they are going, or yeah, the Y chromosome is going to convert ovaries into testes. And so you can see that they descend into the scrotum the last 2 months of fetal development. Sometimes they don't descend right away. It takes a little bit of time for them to descend. Sometimes they never descend. So if we're not getting the testes out of the abdominal cavity, the internal temperature is going to be too high for sperm to be viable. So the role of the scrotum is literally to regulate the temperature of the testes. So if it's hot outside, the scrotum is going to allow those testes to sit further away from the abdominal cavity. And if it's cold, the scrotum is going to bring them up closer to the abdominal cavity. So super important function of the scrotum. So if we look a little deeper into a singular testis, we see these tubes. We call this seminiferous tubules. And it's all along these seminiferous tubules where we are going to make sperm. I don't need you to know lobule that's not important. But we see here's the epididymis. It actually just looks like more of the seminiferous tubules, all just kind of wadded up tighter. But anyway, here's the epididymis. They are not making sperm, but they are storing and maturing sperm. And then here's the vas deferens, which is going to be the duct that's going to allow that sperm to exit the seminiferous tubules. In this figure, what we see is essentially one singular seminiferous tubule has been cut in cross-section. If it makes you feel any better, this could be a rat testis or it could be a human testis. What we see here is essentially, out here are the very young cells that will be destined to become sperm. But they are going to go through meiosis 1 and meiosis 2 and eventually get their tails and the acrosome, this enzyme on the tip of the sperm's head, to ensure that they are mature. But they are not mature at this point. That's going to happen as they move through the seminiferous tubules into the epididymis. Here we see the interstitial cells. These interstitial cells are going to be super important because they are going to be nourishing these sperm. So here we look at a diagrammatic representation. So someone's drawn it to show us here's the cell that's eventually going to go through meiosis. It's called the spermatogonium. It is, in fact, diploid. And it's dividing by mitosis to make our primary spermatocytes. Yes, I said mitosis. So now we have a cell that's actually going to undergo meiosis. So it goes through meiosis 1. Now we have a secondary spermatocyte. And then we have our early little sperm guy here, the early spermatid. But essentially what we have is the production of this immature sperm, and they are haploid. So we start out with the diploid cell here, the primary spermatocyte. It goes through meiosis, and now through some development, it's going to make the sperm. All right, so here we have the head of the sperm. The acrosome is the part that has the enzyme, and this enzyme is needed to essentially burrow into and penetrate the egg. So here we have the tail. Yeah, that's all good stuff. What you should know is that in this middle piece, there are many mitochondria that's going to be there for the on-demand production of ATP. And we need that ATP to propel the tail. So the tail isn't energyless, it needs some energy, so it's getting that from the mitochondria cranking out tons of ATP. So why might there be glucose in the semen or other forms of sugars? Essentially so that the mitochondria have that sugar so they can make the version of energy that cells need, the ATP. Okay. So interstitial cells. So in addition to, I said nourishing, just to be a little vague, but nourishing our sperm, essentially these interstitial cells are important to making testosterone. So it's making male sex hormones, we call androgens, and the most important one is testosterone. So these are lying between the seminiferous tubules, cranking out that testosterone. We are about done with the first part here, so I'll see you in part 2.